So I thought this could be an interesting idea for a video, which is going to be talking about quarterbacks and kind of how they played on deep passes versus what the actual results were. Because again, results-oriented thinking can sometimes get you in trouble. If a quarterback makes a great throw deep down the field and it results in an interception due to like a drop pass or something, the one example I think of right away is Joe Burrow threw a great pass to Jamar Chase. It sort of bounced off Jamar Chase's fingertips, went backwards, and got intercepted. That was a great throw from Burrow, but it had some bad results. And because of something like that, people might now, if a few of those things happen throughout the course of the season, people will feel worse about a certain player than maybe they actually should. Because the numbers aren't as good, but actually, they still performed just as well. Now, how do we exactly evaluate that? That's where things get tricky, right? The best way I figured is let's just use a PFF grade, which again, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. I know it's not perfect, but one thing that PFF grade does a good job of is, again, it's smart people who are watching the film and giving their own opinions. Their own opinions aren't always going to be right, but they're going to be right more than they're going to be wrong. And because of that, it's taking away sort of the, results-oriented thinking. It's taking away that, Jamar Chase dropped for an interception, and instead of giving credit to Burrow for that, and then I'm going to compare the PFF grade to passer rating, which is just a pure results-based stat, which is still a pretty good results-based stat, but it still is pure results-based. And I'm just going to kind of compare them together and see how that works. And I found some pretty interesting things. So first, let's talk about these three guys. These are guys who, so I got to set up what this chart is. On the left column, so obviously all the way on the left, that's their name. Then the one in the middle is going to be where they ranked in terms of PFF grades on passes 20 plus yards down the field. And then finally, all the way over to the right, that's going to be their passer rating. So these is kind of sort of the results. So you have the name, you have how good they were, and then what the results ended up being. So for someone like Brady, he was actually really good at throwing the ball down the field. Third highest rated PFF player, but the results ended up being 12th. So this is, again, if you want to say it's luck, you can say it's luck. If you want to say it's talent that's, around him, you could also factor that in a little bit. Again, if you throw up a jump ball, PFF, I don't think really gives you credit or discredit for it. But, if it ends up as an interception, well, now the passer rating is going to end up as, a bad thing instead of a good thing. To me, one of the things that jumped out at me right away is there was a couple of, good passes by Brady that ended up as interceptions. I remember he had a Hail Mary interception. So, something like that is just going to cause it to be a little bit worse. Same thing with Joe Burrow, who I even brought up that Jamar Chase play of that was a great play that's going to help his passer rating, or help his PFF grade, but it hurt his passer rating. So those two things go in opposite directions because of a play like that. And Matthew Stafford also not quite as big of a jump as the other two guys, but there's still a 5-spot jump right there. He was better on deep passes than the results ended up being. The primary reason I'm going to give for this stuff is mostly luck. That's kind of what I think is the case. You could argue there's some skill involved here as well by the talent around them or even by them themselves, but I'll probably attribute it more to luck, which to me tells me Brady, Burrow, and Stafford were all probably better than maybe we realized. And if you think about it in hindsight, that kind of makes some sense. Matt Stafford ended up being the best quarterback in the playoffs last year, and Burrow and Brady lost to Matt Stafford, who were also, those guys did a very good job in the playoffs themselves, so it does kind of make some sense that maybe they were better than we realized. On the flip side, these were two of the more dramatic ones, and this is actually, I've been, for whatever reason, bashing Davis Mills all offseason, it feels like. Well, but this is a good example of kind of just the flip side of Jared Goff was, according to PFF, the 34th best deep passer in the league last year, but he ended up with the 15th best, passer rating, which to me, I would suspect that would end up going down and kind of reverting back to his talent level instead of the results itself, which that's how I would assume, which means that maybe he won't quite be as good at that stuff next year. Davis Mills is a very fascinating case here because he ended up having the best results out of anybody throwing the ball 20 plus yards down the field. He was first in football, but the PFF grade was just 15th, and this actually does check out to me. I saw a few where they just seemed like random jump balls that worked out and got touchdowns. Like that Patriots game, there was one perfect example, like he just threw one up and it was a touchdown, and it's like, okay, you got credit, good work, but you didn't actually do, I guess if you want to say, you put it in the right spot, sure, but the results are outweighing the talent there, and over the course of the next 100 games, I don't expect that to work as consistently as I would expect someone like, say, a Joe Burrow to be more consistent, even if Burrow's actual overall results were significantly worse last year. Going over to this next chart, these are some more guys who are kind of, again, in that same vein of guys who were, solid last year at the deep stuff, but didn't maybe necessarily have the results to show for it. So these are guys who I would suspect would be a little bit better in terms of statistics the following season. That's what I would suspect would happen. At the top, Jacoby Brissett, who, him and Tua are on this list, which can lead me to believe maybe it is a Dolphins thing, perhaps. That would make some sense to me, right? Because they both played for the Dolphins. Brissett's was very significant, 12th and then 31st. Part of that might have been small sample size as well, which can cause for that kind of disparity to happen. I don't, who knows? Brissett might end up being a starter next year in Cleveland for some time, so that actually might come into play, and he might be better than maybe people realize, which probably does make some sense. I do feel like he's better than maybe some people realize. And then Tua, again, it's not a massive jump. I'm going from the top to the bottom here on the list. Sorry for being a bit all over the place, but a 6-spot jump is still that's somewhat significant. He's probably maybe slightly better at the deep stuff than people realize, and again, when so many of the statistics come from these type of passes, it can swing it so much. That's why I've kind of isolated this in deep passes in general, because I think one or two plays can heavily swing the data a little bit, which makes guys look worse or better than they actually are. And then finally, the two in the middle, two rookies, Mac Jones and Justin Fields, which is interesting to me because, someone like Mac Jones, and honestly, someone like Justin Fields, both of those things do follow to me. I feel like when those guys did throw the ball down the field, they didn't have a ton of success doing that, and I didn't think it was really their fault. I still remember, I thought Fields had one play where it was a beautiful deep pass, and Robinson just didn't make the play. So, okay, passer rating goes down, but the PFF grade goes up. That's kind of how that works. Jones, kind of a similar thing. I thought the Patriots receiving corps did a great job at most of what they were doing. The one real area they lacked was having a deep threat on the outside. So I think that talent could come into play there a bit, where Jones is maybe making the correct read, making the correct throw, but the talent isn't doing great at those specific things. It did good at the 20 and in stuff, but kind of 20 plus, it kind of did struggle a little bit. So that does check out to me. And finally, a few more to talk about, just because I found it interesting. These are kind of guys who, for the most part, they're how they performed actually matched up with the results, which is the case with most of these guys, is that the results are going to be similar to how you performed, of course, but there's going to be some flukiness, which I would assume the following year, the passer rating will be closer to the PFF grade than the other way around. Kyler, Josh Allen, and Kirk Cousins were all top 5 in both categories, so kind of leads me to believe, hey, those guys all did a good job at the deep stuff last year. I'm willing to say that that's probably not a fluke. They'll continue to be good at it. Mahomes was a little bit worse, actually, at a PFF grade than he was at passer rating. He could be another guy you could put under the, hey, maybe he got a little lucky last year. Maybe having Tyreek Hill to bail him out a little bit made things a little better. I don't necessarily disagree with that. Again, keep in mind, I think Mahomes is awesome. I also think he didn't have his best year last year, and even in his not best year, was still 8th at this deep stuff, and I have, he's been first in previous years. I expect him to kind of bounce back, but the results probably were a little bit better than he actually played last year, but I'll trust the bigger sample size with the past 3 years. So yeah, I think it's interesting stuff. I mean, how much do I take into this? How much stock do I take into this? I think actually a decent amount. I do think that now I'm going to say, oh, okay, that explains why Davis Mills kind of maybe had a better passer rating than it feels like he deserved last year. He got a little lucky on the deep passes. That's, again, my guess there. I'm also basing this off of tape I've watched, right? I'm not just looking at these numbers in isolation. These numbers track with what I watched on film, which is why I'm kind of more willing to believe it, if that makes sense. That's why you blend this stuff together. If, what you see on the numbers actually, in hindsight, makes you say, oh yeah, that tracks with what I saw on film, I think then it makes sense to use it. And I'm also probably going to think okay, Brady, Burrow, and Stafford probably better at the deeper stuff and probably were a little better in the regular season last year than we maybe gave him credit for. I really feel that way about Burrow. I think Burrow is a lot better than people give him credit for. Some people think he's, as great as I do, but some people don't. Stafford, I think, also makes some sense. Like, yeah, he was probably maybe closer to playoff Stafford than regular season Stafford than we realized, perhaps. Maybe not quite as much. He definitely still improved his game in the playoffs for sure, but, a little bit of the regular season. And I also should mention, this stuff is factoring in playoffs as well. It's not just factoring in regular season, but still, kind of that's something that makes me think, maybe his actual value is a little better than his perceived value. But, not massively so, I would think. But yeah, that's kind of what I think about all this stuff. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts on all of this? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.